Good afternoon, everyone. Cal Gould here with another interview on the history of ball hockey in the Edmonton area. We've had a lot of individuals that have played from the early years, and this person is no different. He's been around for a long time. So let me ask, what is your name and where are you from?
My name is Rick Magee and from Edmonton, Alberta. And I started playing ball hockey pretty much in 1976.
Now, before you started playing ball hockey, what are some of your early memories of playing like a street version or an unorganized sport of ball hockey? What do you have memories of that when you were in your youth?
My brother and I, Scott, grew up in an area called Richie. And it was a wartime house right on 99th Street and 79th Avenue. And we often would play in our back alley. So behind our house, we had a back alleyway that we would clear off, and we would put up a couple goalposts. And this was a popular area for the kids in our neighborhood. And we actually, at that time, had a lot of activities at different sports like soccer, like football, and ball hockey was one that we played in our back alley. So that was kind of my introduction to that. And of course, down the block, we had the Richie Community Rink, which was run by Mr. Russell. He was a retired fireman, and Mr. Russell got us to clean off the ice. And that became a real privilege for us to be able to go on this outdoor rink and play hockey in any type of weather. And that's kind of the way we spent our youth. It's interesting when you think back to that time, how we were kind of on our own. It wasn't really parent supervised. We had an individual in the community, Mr. Russell, who basically gave us shovels, gave us the scrapers, and we'd clean the ice. And we kind of carried that on into our back lane. Like, we would clean the back lane and make sure that we could be prepared for sort of our neighborhood friends. And a lot of our friends, by the way, we played hockey with. And I know in the community of Richie, my dad was our first coach, hockey coach. And we had a team at that time, which was a Pee-wee team. And that's kind of when I started to play hockey, was in Pee-wee. But we had to recruit from all different, we had to recruit soccer players, we had to recruit kids that were underage just to field a hockey team. And it was, I mean, those were good memories. And our friends that played hockey with us also played ball hockey. And that's kind of how I got introduced. We lived in the Richie area up until I was 14. And we built a house, a new build in Mill Woods. And my parents, we moved out there, and actually at that time, Mill Woods was just starting to get their hockey program started, and they had a midget team. And that midget team, this would have been in 1976, had a couple players on it that were brothers, Gerald and Ron Brochu. And they were twins, and I met them and got to know them as well with some other people, and they were the ones that started up, Gerald and Ron started up this team, the Nordiques. And I'm not sure how Gerald, I remember a name, and you may have heard it, but it was John Geiger. And John was the one that started up this outdoor ball hockey league down at Kinsman. And I think originally, I remember there was a team with Ryan Munsterman and a few others. I think they were called the Arrows. There was Nordiques, and there might have been 3 or 4 teams that started in this outdoor rink. And it was basically from this hockey team that I played in Mill Woods that I started to play ball hockey. But in that time, I, of course, went to high school, and hockey was a big part of my life, but I sort of was introduced to other sports through I went to Scona High School, and I got kind of recruited by my phys ed teacher, and my phys ed teacher wanted me to go out for football. And so I started playing football in grade 10. And I remember having a conversation with my dad, because my dad was a big hockey player where he played. I mean, he grew up in North Edmonton, and my dad actually played for the Oil Kings. And at that time, his best friend was Norm Allman. And Norm Allman grew up in the back alley from my dad, and they went to an outdoor rink just like my brother and I did. But I had a conversation with my dad, and I just said, Dad, I'd kind of like to try football, and I'd like to try basketball. I'd like to try some other sports. And it was too difficult. And I played in grade 10. I tried to play football and hockey and basketball and hockey, and it was just too challenging. So that year, I think it would have been 1975 is when I did both. And in 1976, I actually, that would have been my last year of hockey. And I didn't play hockey again until I was 36. But the way I stayed connected was through ball hockey. And it's funny because what it ended up being ball hockey, as it is for many people, it became a connection to a lot of friends and a lot of people that our lives get busy. And we actually, this team that got formed, we too, and I don't know the dates, but I do remember our first indoor game when we played, I think was at Tipton Arena. And then we also played in Donnan Arena. And it became a group of people. And the picture that I sent you, Cal, if you notice on that picture, we had multiple brothers that were on the team. So on that team, there was myself and my brother Scott. There was Ron Brochu, there was Gerald Brochu, and then their cousin Jerome Brochu. And then another cousin, Josh, was kind of like a manager who played now and again. Then we had Henry Tessier and Roger Tessier, brothers. Then we had Todd Reed and Jay Reed. And Jay, of course, played with the Bears. And we, Jay and Todd grew up in the Richie area. So we knew them from way back. I mean, their mom and dad were friends of our mom and dad. And so it became a bit of a community. And I think that that's what was really kind of special, is we became this community of players that maintained friendships for a really long time. And I'm still, and I'll try not to get ahead of myself, but I'm still connected with that group of players. And I'll give you another backstory, when we get a little bit, but I still, in 2005, Edmonton hosted the World Winter Masters or the World Masters Games. And they actually had a hockey competition. And we entered that competition in the over 40 category. And we went in as the Nordiques. So I have a picture that I could send you of the team, and there are original ball hockey players on that team that we've been together since the 1970s. So it's interesting how you keep those connections over time. So Gerald and Ron, and by the way, I tried to reach out. Gerald got a job in Ontario working at a golf course. And I haven't been in contact with Gerald for a long time. And Ron kind of had to leave ball hockey because his eyesight was going. And Jerome, and so they were sort of the team, they were the ones that started up this team. And then I kind of took on that responsibility of Gerald, and I kept running this team moving forward. But that group that I sent you a picture of, what happened is a lot of us went to university, and on that team, you're going to notice that I went in 1979. I played football at Scona High School, and in 1979, I went to play with the Bears football team. And that was a great experience. And I got to meet many friends that I still have today, but my training, and I wasn't one that would go for a run. So I wouldn't just go outside and run on a track. I just didn't see the purpose. My training and my conditioning came from ball hockey. And I continued to play soccer at that time. So soccer has probably been the longest sport I've played, and I've played basketball and ball hockey. But in the off season, my training involved basketball and ball hockey. That's and soccer. Those were the sports that I played to get my conditioning up to play football. And what I did was we made connections with the hockey team. So I got to meet some of the hockey players because at that time, our dressing room was right in Claire Drake Arena. And we had a dressing room at the far end, and then the hockey team was a few rows, and I got to meet them. And then we had some parties together. So I met Kelly Brooks, who was the goalie at that time. I met Rick Swan. I met Breen Neeser. And we all of a sudden had on our team, we had a bunch of hockey players that were doing the same thing, loved the sport of hockey, but also loved the sport of ball hockey. And then through my football connections, we had a number of football players. So in that picture, Dana Donald, we had, I forgot to mention Jay Reed also was a hockey player, but Dana Donald was a football player. Andy Schenke played football. Stu McAndrews played football. Tom Richards. So Stu and Tom both went on to play for the Eskimos. And I know Tom Richards, Tom had these fast twitch muscles, and he played for the Eskimos. And the guy was one of the fastest 40-yard runners, but if you asked him to run anything beyond 40 yards, he would collapse. But Tom played ball hockey with us, John Lamb, and John Lamb was one of the last players to actually, his last year of football, he played football and hockey, played Bears hockey and Bears football, which I know before him might have been the lawyer, and I can't think of his name right now, but it might come to me. But anyways, that's quite an accomplishment. I mean, that's quite amazing to be able to play multiple sports like that. But we also had on our team a U of A wrestler, Mark Urich, at the time was on the U of A wrestling team. And we also had a fellow named Dave Youngs, who was a basketball player. So Dave played for the Bears basketball team. We had Mark, who's a wrestler. So we had, again, this community of university athletes that came together, and ball hockey was this common area that we brought together. And that picture that I sent, and whether it was 1986, the unfortunate part is that I know the Nordiques, and I don't have all the dates, and that's why I'd like to talk to Gerald and Ron about it. But because I was playing football at the time, I wasn't able to go to the nationals with the Nordiques, and they had won a number of provincials and had gone on to national championships, but I was always playing football. And it wasn't until my last year, Jim Donlevy was the head coach, and it was the last year, my 5th year of football, that I went to Coach Donlevy, and I said, we have a national championship of ball hockey, and I've been playing ball hockey, and I'm thinking it was 1984, and it was in Newfoundland, and we happened to have a football game. It was in Winnipeg. We were playing University of Manitoba, and I was able to go, and I played Saturday football, and I caught a flight, and I carried on to Newfoundland. And at that time, I was rooming with my brother, Scott, and Andy Schenke, and I arrived in Newfoundland. And I'm all excited because it's my first national championship. I'm finally there. And I notice our room is covered with beer bottles. There's empty 26s of vodka. And I said, how we doing? Not so good. We lost our first 2 games. And so we were kind of out already before it even started. And I got to play 1 game in the nationals. And that game was against Manitoba. Of all teams. I just had flown from, and we beat Manitoba pretty soundly. I think we beat them 6-0, but it was, that was my first taste of the nationals. And, we had some great success as far as the ball hockey went. And that success, I remember, and I guess, if we're looking at a team that I always remember playing against, it was our biggest competition was always the Playboys. And that was Malcolm Stenson's team, and Doug McCarthy and Dino and James McKay was the goalie. And that was kind of the team that I found if we won the cities, we probably would go on and win the provincials. But there was a transition in ball hockey. And I think you probably noted that always Ontario, Quebec, and even Newfoundland seemed to be a little bit ahead of Alberta. And what I found is even when we went to Moncton that year, in Moncton, we played Newfoundland in the semifinal, and that game went to overtime. And I remember that game that we had a couple breakaways in overtime and just couldn't score. And then the bounce went their way and it was in the back of our net. And they went on to play Ontario. But these teams, what they had was they all had coaches. And Alberta, our team, was a self-run team. Like it was always either Gerald, Ron, myself, Henry. We were kind of a self-coached team. And that is difficult if you're a player coach, because there are some tough decisions that you have to make sometimes during the game. And sometimes those decisions you're making in the moment, and it may not be what's the best decision for the team. And I thought the Nordiques, when I look at our teams, we were definitely competitive with Ontario, with Newfoundland, with British, every team we were competitive with. Like we, in a certain moment, we definitely could win, but the best we got for the Nordiques was we got, I think, 2 bronze and probably a couple 4th places. And then, these other tournaments, I'm not sure what happened in Newfoundland, where we end up finishing, but probably like 7th or 8th. And we never actually made that transition until one year. And I have to check with my brother or maybe Rick Swan, but Rick Swan's dad came with us to a nationals, but it was a little bit, it was a little offsetting because he didn't coach us during the year. He just came and joined the team in this national championship. And I think it threw a lot of players off. And we had been so used to during the cities and during the, it didn't work out the way we had planned. And I think it would have been better, like Rick, I don't know if you knew, but Rick Swan has kind of gone on, and he's an ex-Bear that has coached for many years. And he coached my son with midget AAA at KC. My son played there. And then Rick went on, of course, to coach Bonnyville for a number of years in the Alberta Junior Hockey League. And then I'm not sure what he's doing now. So I haven't really had contact with Rick, but it would have been better, I think, if his dad had coached us right at the start of the year and we had been used to having that direction and understanding his philosophy and the way he kind of saw the team. But just to do it at a national championship, it didn't work for us. But we recognized at that time that, part of it is we needed to have a strategy, and we needed to have, and that a lot of our strategy and our breakouts and our forechecks and our power play actually came from Rick Swan. So Rick was really, even back then, he was quite a hockey mind. And we used a power play, like we did a 1-3-1 where very often I was up at the top. We'd have 2 wingers sort of on their off wing. We had a centerman in the high slot, and usually the other defenseman, which often was my brother, would go in front of the net. So we would set it up that it got 1-3-1, and then that was, because you had that floating blue line, you could kind of stretch things out, and that was the power play that Rick designed for us. And then he also, in our practices, and we had a lot of practices outdoors, but we also booked ice. I remember we booked ice at Donnan Arena, and that usually was Gerald that would book it. So even in the earlier stages, we had practices as a team, and we'd work on breakouts. And Rick had designed our breakouts, and it was more for communication, where the center would cycle down low, but we would communicate and talk about how we would play the ball and where the pressure was coming. And that made a big difference too. So we had success, but we had coaching kind of within. But when it came to, like, I think what we needed was we needed someone when we went to a nationals that kind of laid down some rules and would say to us, okay, guys, you know, you got one chance at winning a national championship. You got lots of chances to go out and party and meet girls or do whatever. And I think we got distracted. You know, we didn't have that person that could kind of say, look, we've got a curfew. And that's probably what we needed. We needed someone to say, everybody's got to be in the room at 11 o'clock. Let's cut down on the drinking. Let's get serious. And for many of us, you know, it was, in some cases, it was an outlet. Like, we would get to a place. And I remember going to St. John's, Newfoundland that year that I did go. That was the first nationals. My brother at that time just found St. John's so fascinating, and with the people, like, he just stayed there. He stayed for an extra 2 weeks. So my mom, when we landed on the plane, my mom asked, where's your brother? And I go, well, he's changed his flight. He's staying there for a bit. But, you know, that was kind of one of the things that I know it was a great, we were all very competitive and we all kind of wanted to win, but we didn't have that, it was just that little difference that would get us to the next level. And Alberta, for a long time, hadn't won a national championship yet. When I look at the athletes and the players that we definitely had the athletes, we definitely had the players. We just didn't have that little bit. And that little bit, I believe, would have been someone who would have taken on the responsibility to set up some rules. And it's a little hard for me to say to you, you know, I'd say, hey, Rick, you need to have a curfew at 11 o'clock. You know, a 25-year-old telling a 25-year-old, that doesn't necessarily go over well. But if it was an adult, so that happened, and I continued to play. And I know I played up into the 90s. So I started back probably in 76, and I played in the 90s. And then it was, you know, back in 92, we had a daughter, and I was a full-time teacher. So I kind of left ball hockey, but I did make a comeback. And the guy that brought me back was Doug McCarthy. And I was probably at that time, when Doug asked me, it was with the team, the Wings. And he said, you know, we're short some defense. Would you mind coming out? And I played a couple games with them. And I think I was 50, I want to say probably about 52, about 10 years ago. And of course, it was a situation where I'm going by a guy, and the guy turned around and he gave me a two-hander on my hamstring, and it blew up my hamstring. And I just went, oh my goodness, you know, it's those are things that you can maybe take and recover from when you're 25. But I couldn't recover when I was 52. So that was kind of the last experience, but it was good to get back out there. And I still recognize that the game now, even the speed of the game is tremendous, but we had players that had that type of speed. And one of the guys that I didn't mention was this Stephen Hunter. And in that picture I sent you, Stephen is the guy, he's sort of right beside Kelly Brooks. And he's in kind of civilian clothes because Stephen was injured that game. And so was Dana Donald. Dana pulled his hamstring and Stephen got injured. But Stephen was a guy that moved from Scotland to Edmonton. And you wouldn't think he would have a hockey background, but he obviously had a soccer background and could run. But he picked up a love of the game of ball hockey. And he is actually a very good ice hockey player. But what Stephen represented was he had this tenacity. Like, he would just not give up on the ball ever. Like, he just battled. And that's why he got injured. I mean, I think in this game, we were playing the Calgary Bullets, which were at that time one of our arch rivals from Calgary. And I have to tell you, and I, maybe I have an issue with Calgary because they played the game a different way. And it wasn't a way that I ever admired, but they played the way to win at any cost. And I don't really appreciate that. And I don't support that. Like, I'm not prepared to injure someone, a player, to take a player out because that's going to help our team win. I'm going to play the game fair, and I always draw the line at that. And the Calgary Bullets, they didn't. Like, if they could, they're going to target your knee, or they're going to slash you, or they're going to try to blind. They just did things that I know every year they won. Every year they wound up winning the provincials. They invited me to join them in the nationals, and I would not go with them because I didn't respect their team. And I felt there was a code that athletes play, and that's like a Doug McCarthy. It's like a Stephen Hunter. You play a certain way, and you're going to play hard, but never crossing the line where you're going to try to intentionally injure anyone. And I felt and you see, I think part of that philosophy came from their coach. And I know the Calgary Bullets had a coach, and it seemed like maybe he had certain players that he instructed that needed to do that. And maybe that's what you need to win, but that's not the way we were. That's not our DNA. It wasn't a way that we were going to play the game. But anyways, back to Stephen Hunter. Stephen came, and he was the type of player then that was even in practices. And I thought the reason the Nordiques did so well is because of our practices, and we were so competitive against each other that we had these practices that just sort of pushed everybody to a level that now when we were in a game situation, the games seemed easier than some of our practices. And we sort of carried that on, but as I said, the team itself just couldn't get over that hump of winning a national championship. Now, moving forward, and I'm a little bit out on the date. I got an invite to play with the Westars, and that was when the Nationals were in Edmonton, and that's the closest I have come to win the national championship, because we were in the final. And we played Ontario, and Ontario had a very, very good team, very fast. And but we were right in it. They jumped out to an early lead, and I can't remember what the score was. But again, there was a little strategy that Ontario team used, and they actually shadowed players. And I hadn't seen that before in ball hockey, where, they would assign a player to shadow a player on the other team. And that was a strategy that they used that became successful because there were some players that they needed to shut down. And that kind of got them. I think the final score might have been 5-3. But I felt that was, that year the Nationals were held in Edmonton. And I don't know what year that was. And so some of the information I think that I can follow up on, and I actually reached out and contacted Henry Tessier, and I know Henry is still in contact with the Brochus. And I tried to, through Messenger, contact Jerome Brochu in hopes that I could talk to Gerald and get some more information on the start. And I'm pretty sure Gerald will remember, because he kind of was one of the guys that was maybe a director of the league that started, down in Kinsman. And he was the one that kind of ran our team. And I was just a guy that was playing ball hockey and kind of was thankful to be invited. But Gerald was the one that kind of got our team started, and I think was a bit of a cornerstone of getting the league started down at Kinsman.
Wow, that's a lot of information. And I'm so happy that you really filled in a lot of details of things that I was not aware of. That, by the way, that was 1991 Nationals in Edmonton, in which the Westars went up against the Midas Top Gun, and I believe the end final score was either 5-2 or 5-3. But I do recall some of the top players like Dale Tukey being shut down. He wasn't getting the ability to get where he would always be to score those big goals, you know.
That's right.
So yeah, that was a very competitive year. So you've more or less covered a lot of my questions that I had here about, you know, how did you get involved? How old were you when you started? And the names of your teams and who you were involved with. But I want to ask you this question, since you played so many other sports, in comparison to other organized sports that you played, what was your impression of the ball hockey organizations that you were involved with in the way that they were run, or how it was, how organized it was?
Well, you know, I have to say that we've attended, I've been involved in a number of city championships, been involved in a number of provincials. And I'd like to say that every national championship that I attended and the provincials was very well organized. And I know there are people, and I wish I knew their names, but I would have to say that the people that ran those events, I don't remember us, you know, ever not having officials show up. I never remember us not starting on time. I remember the facilities that we played at. There was only maybe one facility that I do remember there was a bit of condensation, but I can't recall where it was. The floors were a little bit slippery at the time. But other than that, the surfaces that we played on, the facilities, like I remember I remember Canmore hosting the provincials, and the rinks we played at were fabulous. And of course, Canmore being such a beautiful venue, the people that have been involved, obviously, they are kind of the unsung heroes, because they ran a sport that allowed myself to not even really have to worry about the organization, because I took on the role of Gerald Brochu, and I was the guy that kind of registered the team. I was the guy that made arrangements for the travel arrangements. I'm the guy that had to kind of book flights and book hotels and take a group of athletes. And the thing that I was quite amazed about is, even looking back at that ball hockey picture, I couldn't believe that with the numbers of players that we recruited back then. Like, our team had to have literally 20 players on it, because we knew that we had to go with 4 lines, and we had to have 6D, and we had to roll them. You know, like we really had to, your shifts couldn't be longer than 35 seconds. And those strategies, you know, are quite, in some cases, are different than ice hockey, because ice hockey, you have the ability to glide, and you can see players like Connor McDavid, or the other night, Draisaitl had a shift of 2 minutes and 46 seconds. Well, you would never think of doing that at ball hockey, because you could not move, and you would definitely hurt your team. And I was quite surprised that, you know, that looking at that, our numbers of how we had such a large group. And I remember Doug McCarthy saying to me, when he came to play for the Nordiques, he goes, I was always used to playing with 2 lines. And he came to Nordiques, and all of a sudden we've got 4 lines. Well, in a situation, if you're playing the proper way, and if everybody buys into these 30-second shifts, you're going to beat a 2-line team every time. You know, regardless, they might have the better players, but the 4 lines, and if everybody's buying into that and running hard and forechecking. So coming back to your point, I never had to worry about that through a national level about, oh, you know, where are we? Oh, we're changing venues. This venue's shut down, or, you know, maybe a timekeeper doesn't show up. They were always very well organized. I know that even at some provincial championships, they had some, it was kind of like skill competitions. I don't know where that was that one year, but I remember like they had the hardest slap shot. They wanted you to go through an obstacle course. So there was obviously people that were running this, and I can't take any credit for it. I just was a participant. But they tried to expand the sport. They tried to bring a lot more interest. And the only involvement that I know is when I got involved in my later years, it was through Doug McCarthy, because Doug has taken a love of soccer now, and he's trying to develop his soccer skills. And he invited me to play with a team, and this team was called Persia. And it actually was a group of fellows that are originally from Persia that fled the country. And we played on this team, and part of it was then he also recruited this other fellow, and again, I can't remember his name, but he played ball hockey. So Doug kind of brought us onto the soccer team, and we, again, it was another bit of a community. So it's amazing how it branches out. And Doug and I still, we still communicate, even though we were arch rivals. And he was one of, Doug McCarthy was a great ball hockey player, and definitely one of the players that I admired, of the way he competed, the way that he worked. And he was another player like a Stephen Hunter, never gave up, like he never stopped trying to hunt the hockey ball. Like he just kept pursuing it. So I'll go back again, but I would say that ball hockey was very well organized from the Edmonton Ball Hockey Association. And I know you were mentioning it was in '93 that Capital City and Edmonton Ball Hockey came together. I thought that amalgamation was good, because it helped. I think it helped both leagues develop and grow by bringing the two leagues together. And it was also, we tended not to see the Westars until the provincials. Like, we sent two representatives, and we never competed against them until, we got to the provincials. So we didn't really know a lot about them. And that's the one team I remember. I know there was an Emperor's team, I think. But it seemed like when we played the Emperors, they just weren't, they weren't as strong as team as we were used to from the Edmonton ball hockey. Like we had definitely, we definitely had tougher games against the Playboys and against some other teams that were within our league. So when we joined, I found that was a good expansion. And then the other part about it is, I know the coverage that they got through, I think it was through Shaw and Henry Federici. That was kind of neat to have an opportunity to watch your game and see yourself play. And the broadcast was quite good. I felt those individuals were excellent in their commentary. I found them to be excellent with their knowledge of the game, and even the knowledge of the players and some of the backgrounds of the players that were playing at that time.
Prior to 1987, there was no distinction of levels of play. There was only one league championship. And so it was, even though there were multiple divisions, there were still only one league championship. After 1987, there were newer levels of play established. Tier 2 was a designation in Alberta. In other provinces, they called it men's A, men's B, women's A, women's B. I know that you played for many years at the Tier 1, or we'll call it men's level A. Did you play at any other levels? And did you manage to ever get an opportunity to play at an international level of ball hockey?
I always played, I guess, the Tier 1 or level A. And it wasn't until I was 52 or 53, the Wings team, who the coach at that time was a former ball hockey player, I played a level B. So I think they were Tier 2. So that's the only experience that I got to play. But so there was a big gap between me playing level A and level B. Like, it was a number of years. So I didn't really get to see the transition and the different levels of the leagues. As far as an international level, there wasn't an opportunity, but interesting enough, my son went, and my son played, and I wish I knew a little bit more about who he played, but my son also played a lot of hockey, and he's currently playing hockey in Sweden. But our son Brett played with played, as I mentioned, with KFC. Then he played with the Sherwood Park Crusaders, and then he went on to play Nate, and then he played Grant McEwen, and he finished his last year. Grant McEwen was last year, and he had an agent and got to play. He's playing right now with the UC Soderham Hockey Club in Sweden, and really enjoying it. But prior to that, part of what he got exposed to is he got an opportunity to play ball hockey, and he played ball hockey for a number of years. And then he got invited to play on the Canada team that went to the Czech Republic, and they won the World Championship. And unfortunately, my wife and I were too busy. We follow our kids around the province and Western Canada, but we couldn't get over there. But my mom and dad went. And my mom and dad went to the Czech Republic and had a holiday and got to watch Brett play and win the World Championship. So yeah, that would be my only, it's my son's experience of an international competition. I've never had that opportunity.
Can you tell me what is your favorite memory from playing ball hockey as an individual or as a team? Or maybe they're both the same memory. What is a real favorite memory that stands out?
Well, I have a few memories that stand out. I remember a game at Tipton Arena, and we were playing the Playboys, and this would have been probably in 1980, and we were playing the Playboys in a city championship. And we were down a goal, and Gerald Brochu at that time, I mean, that's one of the things about ball hockey. He had a way of curving the ball. Malcolm could do that too, because Malcolm Stenson had this curve. But anyways, Gerald took a shot from just over our blue line, and it curved up and down. And of course, it beat their goalie, and we tied up the game, and then we won in overtime. So we won the city championship. And I thought that was something that maybe we didn't deserve, but we somehow pulled it off. And, you know, from a personal level, I do, this probably might have been in Moncton in the national championship. I got recognized as one of the top defensemen in the nationals, and that was kind of a nice recognition. But I also felt that it was a way for our team. Our team got recognized in that nationals. Like, it was a competition that we definitely, and we kind of got after the final game, we got together with Newfoundland and kind of partied with them a little bit, and that was a thing that, you know, in many cases, you don't necessarily get opposition teams getting together, but we got together with them, and they really sort of shared with us their take on the game that they played against us in the semifinal. And I thought it was kind of nice to be recognized at a national level that, you know, we had a team and we had a program that was as good as any other province. And it was interesting too to me that Newfoundland, which you wouldn't really think the province would have as many ball hockey players as Alberta, but they had an amazing group of athletes and an amazing group. And a lot of them might have been from Alberta that at that time maybe had traveled to Newfoundland to work or vice versa. But I do know that they had very, very tough teams and very hard to play against, very disciplined as far as the way they played. I guess the thing that probably sticks with me the most is probably some of the friendships that I have from ball hockey that I still have today. And I think that's the beauty of hockey, whether it's ice hockey or ball hockey, is that it's a tight-knit community. It's a lot of good people. And I have friendships now that I've had for, like I mentioned to you, this group of athletes, and I'll this kind of jumps ahead, but in 2005, we competed in the World Masters Games. And then in 2010 was the first World Winter Masters Games. And it again was, we changed the name from the Nordiques to the Edmonton Flyers. And we called ourselves the Edmonton Flyers because in 1954 and 55, the Edmonton Flyers had one of the best minor hockey teams probably in the world. If you look at Glenn Hall was their goalie, they had Johnny Busick, Norm Ullman, Bruce McGregor. They had amazing players. So we became the Edmonton Flyers in 2010, and we actually went to Bled, Slovenia, and that was the first World Winter Masters Games. And to let you know, here is a group of guys who, my brother Scott, Stephen Hunter, Henry Tessier, Kelly Brooks is our goalie. We're all still playing together. So we did 2005, and we actually we won the gold in the over 40. In the 2010, which is Bled, Slovenia, we went through the round robin undefeated, and we beat we met Latvia in the final, and we played Latvia during the round robin and beat them on a North American ice. But we met them in the final on an Olympic ice, and it's amazing what a difference it made just on the size of the ice. Anyways, they beat us pretty soundly, 7-2. But we got silver in 2010. Then 2015, the World Winter Masters Games were in Quebec City, and we went there and we won gold. 2020, the World Masters Winter Masters Games was in Innsbruck, and we actually went and we won gold. We played a US team in the final, and this was an over 50 category. So we went over 40, over 45, and then we went over 50, over 50. And now our team is pretty much over 60 years old, and we're going again in 2024. It's in Lombardy, Italy. So this will be our 5th World Masters. And here is, if you go back, these are all ball hockey guys.
Yeah.
So Kelly Brooks is still our goalie. Henry Tessier is still playing. My brother Scott's still playing. We have Andy Schenke. We have a bunch of ball hockey guys that have transcended from the 70s, the late 70s, to now 2024. So that's quite a legacy to play. So that's probably the thing that I feel the greatest gratification is, that I'm still playing hockey with a group of guys that I started playing with in 1976. It's kind of amazing that you can keep that connection. And the other thing, as you know, Cal, to me, our lives, a lot of it, we lost our community during COVID. A lot of us lost our sense of community because the teams that we played on and the people that we interacted with and we got together, we weren't allowed to do that anymore. It just didn't happen. And I think a lot of people suffered greatly because of that. And I'm kind of thankful that now I'm back, and many of us need those goals in life. Like, we need to kind of know, hey, you're going to World Winter Masters Games, or you're going to a national championship in ball hockey. And it's something that probably just keeps our motor running. It keeps us motivated. It keeps us energized, keeps us in shape. It keeps us active. And And we kind of need those things. And that's what I found. Probably the greatest thing about ball hockey is there's something I really enjoyed. I enjoyed the camaraderie. I loved the game. I thought it was a great game. It still is a great game. And but probably the thing that I'm going to miss is not being able to continue to probably run and move. And that's why I still play soccer, but I find ice hockey to be easier on my body. You know, just the gliding and the skating, as long as I don't hit the boards, I mean, I'm fine. But the soccer, I limped for 3 days after playing soccer, but I still love playing the sport.
What do you feel has made the greatest impact on the sport of ball hockey, whether it's the growth or anything along that way? What do you think has been the biggest impact over the years?
The game itself, what has had the greatest impact, probably a lot of people have recognized the great conditioning of ball hockey. And as I mentioned, there's not the gliding, but you're basically running nonstop. And the game itself, in its adjustment to moving into the rinks, and actually what they've done is now you've got a sport that very often arenas are left vacant in the summertime, the spring, the summer, and the fall. I think the way their season lines up and coincides, it's a great offshoot. The thing that I feel saddened about with ice hockey right now is it's become very elitist, and it's become very challenging and difficult for our youth to play the sport because it's become very expensive. And I still think what ball hockey has to its advantage is it has kept the expense down. When you look at buying yourself the equipment, you're not looking at the same costs. If you can get yourself a good pair of basketball shoes, you can still get them at a fairly reasonable price. You don't necessarily have to spend $300 on or $400 on a hockey stick. The game itself is catering to, I think, a lot of our youth that have the ability to play and are not being excluded. And I think, unfortunately, we're getting a two-tier hockey program now, especially that hockey has moved into these school communities. Kids, parents, how can they afford to send their son or daughter to a hockey program that's going to cost them $25,000, $30,000 or up? And ball hockey provides an alternative. And I think that ball hockey, hopefully it keeps its roots and allows people to come out. That I remember when I started, we never wore shin guards, and it probably was a team. I don't know if you know Al Schreiber and the Schreiber brothers. They played for the Warriors. Man, if they knew you didn't have a shin guard on, you were getting one on the shins. And that kind of brought that was the initial where I started to wear the referee shin guards, because I had some welts on my shin, and that kind of forced you to get. And then, of course, we started to bring in elbow pads, and so more equipment came into the ball hockey end. But I think the appeal of it is that it's still a grassroots game, and it allows people to come in, and it's a sport that can kind of welcome. It's very inclusive. So that, I guess, that's the greatest thing about that game.
Well, that leads to my next question. What advice would you give to someone that wants to play the sport of ball hockey?
Well, I would actually encourage, one of the things that I think is missing, and it's not the fault of our youth, is that everything in their lives is very structured, and we don't allow our kids to have those moments where they can just play and just be who they want to be, and discover certain parts about them. And probably the back alley of Richie, where we used to clean off the driveway and just have little matches like that. I would say yeah, just try to be young, try to stay young as long as you can. And that's probably why we play sports, because it reminds us of our youth. And a game like that, the biggest thing is you got to have fun. Remember that it's a game. So for our young people, I would encourage them to do things that they enjoy and find safe places that allow you to be yourself and allow you to make mistakes. And maybe that's the other thing that needs to shift with Hockey Canada right now is we're seeing our youth right now are probably not going to be as attracted to the game of hockey because the mindset of hockey tends to punish you for making a mistake. And the only way that you're going to learn is you got to be in an environment that you're allowed and encouraged to make mistakes. That's the only way you can learn. And I think we're seeing that right now with Hockey Canada, that the coaches that have been in positions of power are coaches that necessarily haven't allowed our youth to make those mistakes. And very, very often, I think that's my son, what he's enjoying about Sweden is Sweden really encourages skill development, and it also encourages player development. And you're not walking on thin ice thinking that if I make a mistake, I may not see the ice again. And I think you're seeing that in the NHL now, that coaches are allowing players to make mistakes and then putting them back out there and maybe talking to them. So if I was to encourage a young person, try multiple sports. And hopefully, I think what I was very fortunate is that I was able to play multiple sports. And I think that benefited. And you don't have to necessarily focus on one sport. So if you are a nice hockey player, give ball hockey, give soccer, give basketball, give other sports a chance, and you'll find that they'll complement you. And hopefully ball hockey continues to be a sport that doesn't become too elitist and allows kids, young people, to just go out there and play and have fun.
Is there a person, if they were here right now with us, that you would want to thank personally for getting you involved in the sport of ball hockey?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny because you got my mind thinking when you mentioned about 2023 and, how that's the 100 years of coming up with regards to what was the 100-year, and 30 years of the combined hockey leagues. But I thought 2023, I would like to do a bit of a Nordiques reunion. And if possible, I'd like to get Gerald Brochu and probably say to Gerald, thank you for inviting me to be a part of the Nordiques. And thank you for allowing me to be a part of the team and play ball hockey. And I would also talk to his brother, Ron. Now, Gerald was kind of the captain of the team. Ron was the assistant captain, and Ron was kind of that silent leader. So Ron never said a lot. He was the defenseman, and Gerald was the center iceman, and Gerald was the more talkative one. But I would probably, it would be Gerald. I would definitely, Gerald and Ron, if I got them together, I would thank them both for getting me involved and allowing me to start and be a part of their team and their community.
The sport of ball hockey, of course, has been doing very well at the national level in Canada for close to 50 years now. Now there is the International Street and Ball Hockey Federation, which has been around since 1996. And world championships have been played at multiple levels: men's A, men's B, women's A, women's B, and then the men's and women's masters is also being played. That's not a caliber play. That's just like what you mentioned earlier. It's the age group that is playing. So knowing that there is all these levels of play and there are now international involvement of the sport, what do you hope to see for the future of ball hockey?
Well, I guess for the future, I'd like to see the game continue to grow. And I don't know if ball hockey is going to stretch into the professional level, and has it gone to that level?
There is been a lot of discussion yes, there has been out east that there is a opportunity for the sport to go professional.
So I guess that might be the next step. Whether it goes to a professional level, whether it gets recognized, it's probably not going to get recognized as an Olympic sport, and it's probably not going to get to that level because it's too similar to something like. But maybe it does if its popularity grows to where you see that you have a lot of players aspiring to play at a professional level. Maybe it becomes an Olympic sport, because you're seeing a lot of sports that are making transitions. And one of them that I can think of is volleyball, that traditionally was an indoor volleyball game and playing 6-on-6 to it now being played beach volleyball. And maybe ball hockey becomes that same thing, that maybe ball hockey, people see the appeal and the popularity of the sport, and it caters to a different type, an athlete. And I know Rick Swan, Rick and I played soccer together all the way back. We played in Bantam, and then we played in the Victoria Soccer Club together. And Rick was always a good runner. And that was a key. You could tell for a hockey player, some hockey players were great skaters, but they weren't necessarily good runners. And if they weren't able to run, then you weren't as effective. You could be the best stick handler and do the best toe drags, but if you didn't have that ability to run up and down the ice, you weren't going to be effective. So the game itself, I think that it would be nice to see it branch out into a professional level, and maybe it gets some recognition of being an alternative sport into the Olympics.
Well, thank you for that. Is there anything else you would like to mention that I didn't ask you a question on? Any topic or any discussion that we never covered?
Just the hockey community again. And there was another guy that I forgot to mention, Steve Florchuk. And Steve was sort of right beside Rick Swan. And Steve Florchuk is another guy that, again, he's an original Nordique. We tend to have a team that would go in these corporate cups, or we would play in these in the vintage tournaments, and Steve would come and play with us. But Steve is another hockey dad that his son got drafted by the Washington Capitals. His son, played at the U of A, and it's interesting how his son was playing and my son was playing with Grant McEwen, and how we make a reconnection again. So it's the hockey world is a small community, and I know right now it's taken a bit of a beating with regards to Hockey Canada and some of the incidents that occurred, but still the vast majority of the people that are involved are good people.
Appreciate everything you've mentioned and shared with us today. We hope to speak with you again sometime in the near future.
All right, Cal, my pleasure. Thanks for reaching out, and I appreciate the call.